And now we come to the last part of this set of videos. There's only one major thing left to discuss, and will probably take the least amount of time for reasons we'll get into later. But otherwise, it's time for the multiplayer expansion, Comrades! Comrades is meant to take place roughly a year within the time Noctis disappeared into the crystal, and before when he shows up in Insomnia, with your avatar being one of the Glaives who betrayed the kingdom, joined a resistance group only to get the call to return and protect the land in his absence. Libertas is back after what he did in the movie, and he, along with Core, run Lestalem for the refugees still making it to the camp. And how convenient that even after the disappearance, there'd still be daylight in this world. You would think the eternal night would be upon us given how quickly nighttime came during the main game. But nope! The main mission is to collect meteor shards, which are used to power the electrical grid, with the goal being to expand upon the power grid as much as possible throughout the continent. Open up many quests to get those shards, and just keep at it until you're able to move on with the plot. You can do these quests either with players or with AI. At first, you open up a few facilities at Lestalem that let you do a few things, like upgrade weapons, buy clothes that open up more customization options, and yes, even mingle around with photos that some cameraman related to this guy takes. Of course, getting a full party can take a while, especially if you plan to do any daily quests, which you have no choice but to have actual players to start. Luckily, it looks like you do get AI if you aren't able to get enough players, so what was the point of locking out AI? Either way, if you wish to complete the story of the game, which according to some people takes about 19 hours at best, you're going to be busy for a long time because the process to getting enough power to fill the entire continent is a long one. And it involves doing the one thing that can make or break a multiplayer game: grinding. Now, as someone who plays a lot of JRPGs or World of Warcraft, I can usually get by with having to repeatedly do daily quests to get things done. But here's the thing. I'm playing in a world where I'm constantly fighting things, flying around and doing what I want to do, freely and without restriction. In this game, you have to constantly pick a quest, do either an AI party or player one, and then have to sit through a loading screen to load the map, and then another just to make preparations before you're ready to go and load the scenario. Then, after you finish the scenario, you load again into a campout scene where the chef, who can be anyone from the main city, even characters like Cindy, make a random meal based on what ingredients you currently have on hand, or depending on the kind of character they are, and then load screen back to home. It's basically load screen the game. You have to do this just to progress through the story, since you need the shards to power up more throughout the continent. The quests you get are pretty much all the same, regardless of what type you get, because you constantly fight waves of enemies, and many of them are pretty tough. I mean, the defense missions are pretty much straight up horde mode, because you're trying to keep enemies from attacking a certain building, object, or escaping somewhere, but you're still fighting waves of them at a time. There's also escort type missions, where you have to ride somewhere while fighting enemies, and then there's also urgent missions that require to be beaten if you want to progress through the power grid. On occasion, while beefing up the power grid, you will get a solo mission that advances progression even further. Like one where you have to fix a rail car near the power plant, one where you apparently get access to one of the royal tombs that Noctis and friends have gone to, and each of the ancient kings give you royal sigils? Why? Is this because of Nyx proving to the kings that you don't need royal blood to wield their power? Not to mention, if you were one of the traitors who went against Regis, why would they lend you anything just because you decided to be a good guy again? But yeah, each sigil can grant you perks that increase the power of some of your moves or magic. It's also something to consider when forming groups, since one person can specialize in one thing while you specialize in something else. Now, on the subject of magic, you can change your default spells depending on weapon skills. You can get new skills for your weapons through the crafting table, which lets you upgrade your weapon's power using the materials you get from enemies. They can only go up to a certain level though, and depending on the facilities you unlock, you may end up getting better gear from them to where you don't need to max out the current weapon, so long as you get enough gil to buy another one. Of course, I don't know how far some of this upgrading goes because, I'm just gonna be honest here, while I did my best to get far on my own, I did not complete the story due to the repetitive nature of this mode. Yeah. All you need to know about Comrades is that it's a bunch of missions strung together to make it look like a meaningful story for the Avatar character being related to Noctis and friends somehow, but it requires needing to unlock most of the continent in order to get to any of that stuff, as occasionally you'll get a named character who tells you backstory to stuff going on in the world, but otherwise it just comes off far in between. You know what this mode reminds me of? Xenoblade X. Why? Well, for starters, you play as an unknown character who has to go around the world doing missions that benefit the last city of humanity. You have to gather a special resource to power the city, while also connecting the world around you. You can team up with others like you on quests, and there's even a multiplayer mode where you do various missions in similar fashion. Both are set in a post-apocalyptic setting, since at this point, Noctis is gone, and demons are starting to take over the world, so in order to keep the light on, you have to keep going on these hunts, getting the meteor shards, and supplying power to each pylon out there. But you know what? At least in Xenoblade X, I'm actually learning about the world around me, meeting various characters, learning individual stories, all that good stuff I mentioned during the first review of FF15. What the hell am I doing here? Just doing the same exact missions with no story value to them, hoping I get enough meteor shards to advance through this seemingly dull story they say exists? There are at least a few times where you get one of several named characters you've met in the main game to join you during a solo quest, but is it really all that worth it? There's also Comrade quests, where you play as the usual bro band in special missions that don't give you experience, but at least you still get meteor shards and special items. Not sure what the point of these are. They're like special scenarios you can do anytime without the story or character development. Even then, the first one, where you're just playing out the point where Noctis goes to their last camp out, is incredibly long and overly difficult. If you lose after getting this far, yeah. Another thing. Unlike in this game, Xenoblade X lets me have tons of different art combinations to strategize with when fighting enemies. For some missions with AI characters, I can literally hold down one button for the majority of a fight and never let go. That's how easy it can be sometimes when half of the fight can be done by holding down one or two buttons. Worse in terms of combat than in the main game, since you're limited on the kind of abilities you have. Sure, the warp strikes and weapon variety help, but not by much. You can travel to other outposts, which appear to have their own facilities and stronger gear, which is good and all. Too bad I still have to keep repeating quests and hopefully not lose in order to build up enough power to reach them. Some take about 2 missions worth to open up, while some of the energy pylons take up way more than I can actually earn. But you know what? Maybe this wasn't the right way to go when covering something like this. This is like trying to cover an MMO, where the only way to get the most story is to get as high leveled as possible, while also doing as many quests as possible. Unfortunately, it just feels repetitive without much variety. Hell, I got more out of Destiny than I did this. I feel like I've experienced all I needed to in terms of the gameplay side of things, and unfortunately, I don't have the time to grind forever to get to the end on my own. So, obviously, I cannot give a proper verdict on the gameplay side of things. But I can certainly go over the plot. So aside from the fact that everyone's trying to survive by spreading light around, some hunters have tried looking for Noctis since his disappearance. I guess this means none of his friends told anyone about him and the crystal. But after getting enough outposts powered up, one voice seems to reach you.
Darkness threatens to plunge this world into night eternal. But hope is not yet lost. So long as the chosen king still lives. Go to him, child of Lucis. The glaive must now protect its king.
Wonder who that could be. Anyway, now we know our old passcode to our phone. And it seems like they found Regis' old ship that Noctis got to borrow. Once the power is supplied there, we learn that people have been getting visions of Angel Guard Island, which I guess explains why they also knew that Noctis was there. Once you get to port, you find Libertas there, and I gotta say, he certainly has even less to do with the story of this mode than the amount of time spent in Kingsglaive. And then, as he tells us more about the island, the credits roll. Wait, so all I needed to do was enough quests to power the outposts and golden keys so I can reach the end of the mode? That seems rather short then. Well, there's actually more to it. After arriving, you're greeted by various astrals, the most important one though being Bahamut. You called me here on the notion that I was going to protect my king. Why the hell are you now suddenly pulling that traitor crap on me? Well, after you beat him, good thing Bahamut shrunk for the purpose of this fight, he absolves us of our sins for betraying Regis, I guess. Even though our avatar is still clueless as to what they did to lose their memory or whatever. Then Gintiana shows up to tell us about this place some more.
The Storm Center. And it is here where the chosen king shall receive the revelation of the Blade Keeper. Yet he cannot awaken the power slumbering within his breast while darkness blight threatens this purest of places.
So basically, we have to hold out for some time until Noctis gets his power up. That's what the second set of credits indicate anyway, that we basically continue on what we do, even when the last light of the world vanishes. Then, after Noctis wakes up, he gets to see what we didn't see in the main game, and that's me, Libertas, and some others awaiting their king after so long. And that's really it, because I assume you make it back to base since your avatar shows up for one of the quests. Okay, I already said I can't fully assess the gameplay aspect without completing it, but after seeing the story, would it even be worth it? Honest to God, I was at least hoping they would do a bit more with Libertas, since his redemption arc was only lightly touched upon in the movie. Then for him to come back with the traitor glaives without much explanation to how he did it, and then not really put in any effort to regain the trust of the kingdom, felt even more insulting than not directly mentioning Nyx during the main game outside of having his weapons available to you. I'm also going to assume that any other characters you meet are only around after doing enough quests, and like the Aranea one I did, would feel short and not well worth it. If anything, the story is basic without anything fleshed out. It has the amnesiac lead avatar, it has a general mission, and it has an ending that ties the gap in the timeline, but doesn't do anything to resolve the amnesia storyline despite Noctis and friends acting like they knew your character in the first place. I guess what I'm saying is, this felt tacked on. Like it needed to do what GTA 5 did with its multiplayer mode, or even in the same case as Metal Gear Solid 5. They were popular in the West, and this game was following Western traditions, but it turned out minimalistic. It felt like trying to do the quests in the main game. I just couldn't stay invested for long. In conclusion of Comrades, at least it was free, but I don't feel like wanting to continue much further. Consider this more of a challenge mode where you repeatedly do the same quests over and over till you're strong enough to tackle harder bosses with health pools large enough to be sponges. If you can muster this kind of grind, go for it. Otherwise, it was definitely not made for me. Now, we're not quite done yet. There is a few more things I want to go over that were either left out of the game or I didn't catch playing during my time with it. Though mostly it's just left out stuff. For instance, for episode Gladio, there was some leftover data that would suggest that Gilgamesh was a lot more important than just testing potential shields to the king. Early on, he had witnessed Arden, brother to the Founder King, turn into a monster due to what he did, and thus Gilgamesh would become the Founder King's personal shield. The transcript that was found shows that one of the souls that Gladios encounters tells him this, and that Gilgamesh awaits those he can entrust his powers to, since he was afraid that what Arden did would bring about horrors beyond his own lifespan, and that's why he sealed himself away in the Tempering Grounds, hoping someone will surpass him in protecting their king. Furthermore, these souls that you keep meeting were all former shields themselves. This would actually instill more of a reason for Gladio to earn Gilgamesh's blessing, and why doing all this was important to begin with, while also delving more into what came of Arden during the first Star Scourge. Of course, that much was left out, as all he gets is advice from Gilgamesh and Kor's old sword. There's also that dummied out friendly fight I showed you at the end of that one video that you could have had with Ignis during his episode, where he and Noctis break the fourth wall, some leftover dossier data, and oddly enough, Noctis' old Versus 13 outfit, along with the model that's left over in the game. Also, while it's apparently impossible to pull off the Armiger glitch, at some point it seemed like people had an easier time moving about areas without getting the infinite load screen. And in Cartanica, it's been updated a lot to feature some new buildings, a more detailed coastline, and get ready, Cindy's truck. Now that's interesting because remember, this area of Niflheim is not meant to be explorable, and you obviously cannot see everything from inside the train. The area is designed in a way where only the places that a player can see are detailed enough so it looks finished without actually applying the same touch to everything else. Yet if they went out of their way to add more buildings and her truck, even after all this time, would that mean they intend to let you revisit this place someday? It might make sense to have that either for episode Aranea, or even episode Noctis if they're doing an alternate timeline thing, because otherwise I can't grasp the idea of having Cindy's truck in Niflheim when you aren't allowed to drive. Same thing applies to Grallia, which this person was able to do using debug mode on Windows. Look at all this detail that you normally would never be able to see at night or from the location you'd be in normally. There's so much that could have been done. The possibilities of being able to do city-based questing either here or in Insomnia, this could have been something monumental in size and scope, even if not everything about it may appease everyone. It could have set a new bar for people to reach in terms of AAA development. But it just wasn't meant to be. All they could do at this point was to try and improve the story, because with the way the game was developed, they had to get something out based on player feedback, and the time frame they had, there was no way they were going to miss out on the PS4 after waiting a few years. So, not counting Kingsglaive, since that was just to try and connect it to Comrades, which, failed to do so since not much was referenced from it beyond the opening of Comrades, everything that I got to experience after getting the Royal Edition was somewhat half and half. On one hand, I appreciate some of the additions and changes they made. It's at least more bearable than when I first played it, and I liked trying out other characters and their functions. I liked how they attempted to fill in some of the plot holes with the later parts of the story, but on the other hand, I really can't stand some of the decisions they made with it. Ravis will always be that one character who gets shafted the most while being put with those that he shouldn't be with. Arden will always be the troll I can't stand because he meanders around instead of accomplishing his goals, and Noctis will forever be that one character who should have had it all, but will lose out to others less fortunate. Again, if you are into Final Fantasy and would like to try this, go for it. But just be warned, your mileage will vary. Well, that's all I have to say on the matter. Depending on the circumstance, I may do the other episodes once they all come out. Until next time, I'm the Media Hunter. Media is my prey, and reviewing them my way.